Michael Malone was fired as the head coach of the Nuggets. Just an assumption is that there is a conflict on who should be on the roster and who should be paid and which players they should bring in. Like, that's the kind of conflict I'm assuming is happening between the front office and the coaching staff. So breaking news just keeps on coming because Michael Malone was fired as the head coach of the Nuggets. So now Taylor Jenkins is actually not the big story, because it was a big shock to everyone when Taylor Jenkins was fired with like 9 games left to go. Well, Michael Malone was fired with 3 games left to go, which I believe they said ties an NBA record for a coach being fired, at this late in the season. I believe the other coach was Hubie Brown in 1989, but don't quote me on that, but I think that was the stat. Michael Malone and the GM did not get along. We heard this rumbling and the reports this past summer about how they were not getting along. When this report came out over the summer, you see the clip I inserted from the video I did when it came out. And my guess back then, with no inside info, was that basically what had come out is the reason is kind of what I predicted. And that is that there was conflict over which players to have on the roster and which players to pay. Now, it's been more boiled down to apparently that the GM wanted the young guys that he drafted to get more playing time, and Michael Malone wanted to play more veteran players. And that kind of goes along with what I said, because I felt like there was a conflict between paying, although someone pointed out to me that they offered Bruce Brown as much as they could, and Bruce Brown left anyway. But Bruce Brown, Jeff Green, KCP this summer, like, those were huge losses. 3 players who were huge parts of their championship team. And I don't know if there was a lack of money being given out to keep these veteran players, because again, the GM reportedly wanted these young guys to get more, playing time and to develop them. And so that would head in the direction of not being as inclined to pay some of these veterans to keep them on the roster, to keep them as a championship contender, and to save the ownership money. And I don't know what ownership wanted. So I'm not talking about ownership themselves. I don't know if ownership was unwilling to spend or if they wanted to spend. I don't know about that. But the whole disagreement is basically about who to pay, who to play, right? And we kind of all saw this coming. It was just shocking that it happened right now. And I'm gonna be honest, people are saying that they were not shocked, or rather, I guess, some of the analysts are saying that they were not shocked that Calvin Booth was fired because his contract was almost up and apparently they couldn't reach an agreement on an extension and whatever. I was shocked that he was fired and not shocked that Michael Malone was fired, because I felt like when we heard those reports over the summer, it just rang red flags in my head that Michael Malone's time in Denver, fair or not, was coming to an end, because we also had heard rumblings for a while that he would butt heads with players sometimes. And I'm not saying whether he is right or the players are right in this sense, but we see some of his press conferences, he's, very blunt, and some people don't like that. So it just seemed apparent to me, again, not saying he did anything wrong, I'm not saying the players did anything wrong, or front office, or the GM, or, ownership. I'm not saying the fault of anybody. I'm just saying it seemed like there was always going to be some kind of disagreement, and at some point it was going to end. And the fact that reports were coming out this summer that the tension started to rise, I felt like it was going to happen with Michael Malone if they did not make a playoff run this season. Go back to that video because I don't remember exactly what I said, but I do think I said if they get knocked out in the first round this year, there's going to be some major shakeups. Now, I was hinting at potentially trading Michael Porter Jr., which I did make a video on, because I do think, unfortunately, he may be traded if, they get knocked out in the first round. But I was just hinting at major roster shakeups because of all the money they have tied up in Michael Porter Jr., Jamal Murray, and Jokic. But Jokic is not going anywhere. So I was saying, really, the only way to make significant roster moves is to trade someone like Michael Porter Jr., who is still young enough to have some upside for a younger team who is looking to grow, but also making the max dollar, so you could trade for somebody, or close to max, so you could trade for somebody on a big contract. I say all that to say, it was still shocking news that we woke up, or we saw it whenever we saw it, that Michael Malone was fired and there was only 3 games left. But again, I was not shocked that he was fired. I was just shocked, like everybody else, when it happened. I was shocked, again, that the GM was fired, but the more that I, heard the reportings, and like I said, we heard the tension, but we didn't know how bad it was until we see all the reports now. And you know what? I actually think the ownership did the correct thing by firing both of them. What I mean by that is, I never call for someone to be fired. I don't know the inside details. None of us will ever know, right? But I'm saying I feel like the ownership made the correct decision if there was one by just getting rid of both of them, since there was, toxicity between the both of them. They just couldn't get along. And instead of picking a side, the owner, the ownership group, whatever, basically said, we're not going to pick a side. We're just going to start fresh and make sure that we have two people, whoever's the GM, whoever's the head coach, when we name a new one, will get along. Because if you fire only one of them, there is a chance that they don't get along. Like the GM doesn't get along with the new coach, and there's a chance that the head coach doesn't get along with the new GM. There's a chance no matter what, but I feel like by just starting fresh, everybody's at least trying to get off on the right foot. Like when you're first hired, you're trying to, at least do your best. You should always try to do your best, right? But like, there's a difference between being just hired and being there for a while. And so I do feel like, again, if there was a correct decision, I kind of agree with them just basically getting rid of both of them. Again, not saying that they deserve to be fired based on, what they have done or haven't done or whatever. I don't know all the details. I'm just saying I feel like this is a way to at least reset the environment and get back on track, because they have Jokic and you want to win a championship with him.